To the members that were able to make it today, I very much appreciate you being here. I know that we had other members that were not able to be here, because of either, stay-at-home issues or other obligations or commitments. But thank you for being here today and participating in this. We've got, some important business to talk about, so we thank you for being here. The first order of business is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, which we had on March the 11th. A copy of those minutes are in your packet.
Move approval.
Senator Reese has moved that we approve the minutes. Any objection? The minutes are approved. All right, the next order of business is consideration of the necessity for an emergency plan for the elections coming up, the presidential primary, the party elections, municipal general elections. And so we have with us Secretary of State and some of your staff. And so, sir, if you would join us at the table and start talking us through. Let's start with the emergency declaration, the emergency certification. And we'll start with that. And let me take care of a little bit of housekeeping while you're getting ready. We are working very hard to observe all the CDC guidelines and social distancing. And so I know that we do have members of the public in the overflow room across the hall. We are limiting the number of folks in this room. But we do have sergeant-at-arms in those rooms with cards so that the public will have an opportunity to speak, and so we'll make sure that we provide plenty of time and opportunity for that. And I have a number of cards here already with folks that are present and want to show their interest in this issue, some of which will speak, some of which will not speak. And so to those of you that are listening across the hall, I want you to know that we know you're there, and we're going to give you the opportunity to participate in this public process. And with that, I think, Secretary, if you'll introduce yourself for the record, and we'll let you begin.
Madam Chairwoman and members, to thank you all for coming in. My name is Kyle Ardwan. I'm the Louisiana Secretary of State. Our country has seen an unprecedented level of bipartisan and non-political cooperation from America's highest office down to our state and local levels of government. Louisiana continues to fight to flatten the curve, and there has been tangible results in that effort. Sadly, this pandemic has cost scores of Louisianians their lives, with our state crossing the grim 1,000 death threshold this week. We are so grateful to our wonderful frontline medical professionals who risk their lives daily to treat and care for those affected by COVID-19, in addition to those needing other emergency care. As before, the concern for Louisiana voters has been the driving force behind all election-related decisions, and all decisions have been made in close cooperation with the governor's office. As with the announcement we made last month, an emergency still exists, and I have once again certified that to the governor, and he has granted an executive order delaying elections until July 11th and August 15th of this year. Under our comprehensive plan, the election will have the options Louisianians know and trust, as well as the expansion of some features not currently employed on a widespread basis across the state. A few things to note right off the bat. This is a necessary, balanced, and most importantly, a temporary, I stress temporary, approach in response to this crisis. This decision was done without the political ramifications in mind. The only thing on my mind has been the safety of Louisiana and the integrity of our elections. Our plan maintains both, in my opinion. This plan has also been worked through for several weeks since I first announced that we were delaying our April 4th election. Should you approve this plan, early voting will be expanded from 7 to 13 days. Louisiana has seen a record amount of Louisianians choosing to vote early, and we do not want to deny those voters that option. A temporary expansion of early voting will allow Louisiana voters more opportunity to vote early while diminishing and dissipating the concentration of voters at early voting sites. Our plan calls for Election Day voting to continue as usual on new dates, with the exception of polling locations in places associated with Louisiana's senior population. Those that choose to take advantage of in-person voting will be able to do so with heightened health measures such as hand sanitizer, gloves, masks, etc. The CDC has cautioned that older adults and people who have severe underlying medical conditions like heart or lung disease or diabetes seem to be at higher risk for developing more serious complications from the COVID-19 illness. Because of this, we have identified 29 changes at voting sites that are currently located at nursing homes or senior citizen centers, which will be relocated based upon whether suitable sites can be found. In 16 parishes, 32 polling locations with approximately 39,000 voters will be relocated due to their association with the senior population. These affected voters will be notified in advance of location changes. Under current law, voters may request an absentee ballot for several reasons, including being over 65 years of age, serving overseas in the military, being hospitalized, or being out of the state to vote in person. What we are proposing in this plan is a temporary expansion for the July and August elections only of the reasons a voter may request an absentee ballot. What we are proposing should not be confused with the universal vote-by-mail systems of other states, but rather a slight expansion of laws already on the books. Under universal vote-by-mail, every registered voter is automatically mailed a ballot for every election. The universal vote-by-mail system has massive vulnerabilities for fraud, and it is not coming to Louisiana under my watch. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are proposing that voters be allowed to request an absentee ballot for a few pandemic-related reasons, including those 60 years of age or older, those with underlying health issues, those subject to stay-at-home, quarantine, or isolation orders, those advised by health or governmental authorities to self-quarantine, those experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and seeking medical diagnosis, those unable to appear in public due to concern of exposure to or transmission of COVID-19, those caring for an individual who is subject to quarantine, and those caring for a child or grandchild if the child's school or daycare is closed. Our plan would still require voters to request a ballot, allow us to compare the requester's signature and addresses to confirm it is the correct voter at the correct address. These are safeguards we have in place to prevent voter fraud in other elections, and we have confidence in them for this election as well. Again, allowing voters the opportunity to request an absentee ballot is temporary in direct response to an unprecedented health event. Our state did something similar in response to Hurricane Katrina, where a displaced voter affidavit was provided to voters affected by the storm. While Hurricane Katrina claimed nearly 1,600 lives in Louisiana, and while we are already at 1,000 deaths, I hope it doesn't take another 600 for people to realize it is not wise to proceed with elections as if nothing is wrong. With this expansive list of absentee ballot excuses, those who want to request one will be able to receive them, but we will not be setting a dangerous precedent of universal vote by mail or limiting ourselves for future elections. This plan is appropriate for the unprecedented circumstances we face, but not binding for when our state returns to normalcy. God willing, we do that very soon. The vote on today's emergency plan will not determine how elections are run in the future, as our election system will revert back to normal after the July and August elections, but it will determine how we respond to the lofty and noble mandate of bringing the democratic process to the people during unprecedented times. The images that came out of Wisconsin's election last week were shocking. Individuals waiting in lines for upwards of 5 hours to vote. I will do everything in my power to keep that from happening here. Additionally, the state's leadership's tepid response to the crisis has been universally panned, referring to other states, with Republicans receiving most of the scorn in Wisconsin. We are still in the process of procuring new voting equipment, so I will be seeing more of you in the future. I intend to continue that process to update our voting system and our equipment, and I do not plan to divert from that. I implore you to pass this common sense plan because it is the right plan for our state's strange times. And I'm sure, like mine, your phones have probably been ringing off the hooks. And I guess one main comment I'd like to end with is, if my friends on the right and my new friends on the left are equally unhappy, then I must have found some middle ground that we could all agree on. I couldn't be more proud of our staff for all the hours put into this, to try to come up with a middle-of-the-road plan that we felt would work for the voters. I understand that there are opinions on opposite to our position that we have taken, and I'm certainly willing to hear those, want to hear those, and look forward to answering your questions that I can, and provide you information that you all need to make the best decision that you can make.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary, for kind of laying that out. I think you did a great job of laying it out. We too want to make sure that we have a safe election process that will address the issues that we're going through as a community. Public safety is certainly important to us, as is the integrity of our election system. And so we share your values and your end in mind objective in that way. I also want to commend you and your staff. It's been a Herculean effort, I think, to work through many different issues and try to provide a plan that looks at all the possibilities. You know, none of us have a crystal ball as to what the world is going to look like in July and August. You know, when you think back, it was the opening day of session, March the 9th, when we had our first case reported in Louisiana, and now we are roughly 5 weeks out from that date. And, you know, we've gone from the first case to something we believe maybe beyond the peak. And the world changes very quickly in just a matter of 24 hours, as the governor likes to say. And so, you know, we share your interest in trying to address public safety and maintain the integrity of the system that we believe, the voting system that we have in the state of Louisiana. As you know, and to our members, I believe this is the first time, the Secretary and I believe this is the first time that the election person in charge of elections has proposed an emergency elections plan, but that was provided for in the statute. It also provides for oversight on the part of the legislature, and that's why we're here today, is to honor our role in that and to provide legislative oversight. The emergency plan and statute, it does require approval from the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee, the House and Governmental Affairs Committee, the governor, and then the majority of the full Senate and the full House, which would be done by you know, a mail-in ballot, an interim ballot type process. So we would not convene at the Capitol to do that. That would be done as we do like an IEB ballot, I believe, between sessions. And so there's lots of opportunities, I believe, through that process for dialogue and discussion, and so we're beginning that process here today. So again, thank you everyone for being here and for participating. So Mr. Secretary, it's my appreciation of the process that this is kind of a little bit of a two-step process. One is the emergency certification that is a document that's in your folders and you all should have received ahead of time, that basically lays out your case for action, I think, as to why you believe this is an emergency and an emergency plan is necessary. And then the second document is the emergency plan that you've proposed. And so we have both of those technically on our agenda. I see those as kind of related, obviously, and so we may kind of talk about them sort of together, but I'd like to at least first start with the emergency certification document. And if there's, I don't know, Secretary, if you want to walk through that a little bit to sort of build you did cover some of these things already in your comments, but if you want to talk through that a little bit, and then we'll open it up for questions.
So, Senator, excuse me, Madam Chairwoman, I do share the appreciation that you have, and as you were saying it, it had popped into my head that I do believe that this is the first time, and unfortunately, I'm the first secretary to have to declare emergency under these laws that I believe were passed in as a result of the issues that were dealt with for Katrina, Rita, and other disasters. These are unique times, and this is unique powers presented under Title 18, 401.3. Our initial, in my earlier comments, our initial reaction was to utilize the emergency powers under 401.1, which was in cooperation with the governor. So I certified the emergency. We delayed the elections. We did that also again just recently in order to get to this point, which then required me to certify this emergency under the same conditions that we were under the last for the two 401.1 certifications, emergency certifications. So this is simply my declaration of the emergency that I believe exists to you as the Senate Committee on Governmental Affairs, to the House Committee on Governmental Affairs, and to the governor, all simultaneously. And at the same time, given the unique circumstances that we're under and the time frame that we're under in trying to obtain the resources for the elections in July and now July and August, we're facing supply chain issues. So we declared we certified the emergency and the plan and submitted at the same time. I think there was probably a time where we would have envisioned, or the previous legislatures would have envisioned, that the certification would come and then developing the plan with input from as many folks as we could as stakeholders, and then presenting the plan. Unfortunately, the timing constraints didn't allow for that, and so it sets us into a compressed environment, if you will, one that is unprecedented, and one that makes probably all of us uncomfortable in that we're attempting to move as quickly as we are. So I wanted you to understand where we are and why things occurred in that time frame. And it unfortunately only gave me limited opportunities to consult with folks, that being the president and the speaker and the two chairs and the governor. So I hope you understand that there was no intention from my perspective to leave any of you out of discussion of the process. We were just in a really compressed time frame. And the senator and I, the chairwoman and I, in communication, she realized that my staff and I, when finalizing the plans, were on a video conference for 4 hours, going through this with a fine-tooth comb to make certain we had not missed anything or created any additional issues for us. So I hope you all understand why this happened so fast and where we're coming from, but it's certainly not meant as any disrespect to the process that is outlined in the law.
Well, thank you, and I can certainly understand and appreciate the schedule that you all find yourselves in, and again, that doesn't necessarily mean that we will work with you as much as we can, and I think that we have been trying to work with you and participate to the extent that we were able to. But at the end of the day, of course, we still have to do our due diligence and make sure that that we're taking care of our constitutional responsibilities as well.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the emergency certification, and it lays out in statute, as you well know, that an emergency, and I'm paraphrasing here, could be declared if there were technical, mechanical, or logistical problems that would necessitate an emergency. So you're not able to have conduct the election as it normally would be held because of technical, mechanical, or logistical problems, I believe is the phrase in statute. And so I was wondering if you would just sort of cover those, what those are that led you to the want to declare the need for an emergency plan?
So one of the first and foremost issues is the necessity to obtain what we have been referring to, and our new acronym in this new world is PPE, personal protective equipment, much like you're seeing in this room, much like I have mine, gloves, masks, shields, etc. We did not want to be competing with our healthcare partners or providers for that equipment. Additionally, hand sanitizer is an important component of that, and as you well know, is very hard to come by. I will compliment my staff. Prior to us doing the first emergency, we obtained 16 55-gallon drums like that of alcohol for mixing, and we were prepared to start mixing our own hand sanitizer for all of our precincts until we realized that our healthcare providers were in need of it more, and our other agencies were in need of it more quickly than we were, and so we provided that to the state to utilize for the services. So the other logistical issues that we face obviously is a concern with regards to being able to have enough commissioners at every polling location on election day. That is a serious concern. Obviously, half or more of our commissioners are over the age of 65. And we would have had to utilize every single other potential commissioner under that age in order to meet our obligation, which we all know is likely, and rightfully so in hindsight, would not be able to do that because of the given circumstances of people's children not being in schools. So again, we moved the election date on. The other logistical issues, if we had, with the heightened awareness and concerns, just in the population of 65 and older, we realized that we were going to be receiving a lot more absentee by mail requests and ballots. In order to utilize and count those ballots, we would need more sophisticated equipment in scanning those ballots and being able to report the returns on a timely basis. We realized in talking to our current contractual vendor that there was basically a run on this equipment because other states were then changing their processes, and we were beginning to have to compete with states as large as New York and New Jersey. Additionally, when you have an increase in requests for absentee ballots and you meet those requests, then you have to have the specialized paper to utilize for printing of the ballots. That was becoming in short supply, and so we were beginning to feel a severe time crunch. As you well know, that there's been a push afoot for vote by mail for all citizens, which is an impossible impracticality in the state of Louisiana, given simply the logistical issues that we face with supply chain, not getting into other issues that we face. So those are the logistical problems that we have. Additionally, we needed enough of the PPE, not just for our commissioners, but we also need it for our equipment. We feel very confident that we can maintain a level of healthcare safety with our election day machines. The new temporary new early voting equipment is a little bit more challenging because those are not the same type of equipment. On the election day machines, they have Mylars, which is a plastic coating, as you have probably seen and touched. Those can be easily wiped with any typical Clorox-based hand sanitizer. I think there's a one behind that bag over there. We would be able to utilize that type of sanitizer for those machines. The early voting equipment requires a specialized type of wipe, and that also is becoming very hard to get. So we're working on that, and we're ordering as quickly as we can and trying to hoard what we can for the eventual election date. So those are some of the logistical issues that we faced. We had a conference call with a large number of clerks of court, and they too expressed concern. They were already getting reports that they were concerned that we would end up much like some of the earlier states, that our commissioners would just not show up. They didn't want to work. They don't want to put themselves in harm's way. So that's, those are serious issues that we faced, and those are the logistical concerns that fell within this emergency certification. Additionally, as I stated in my comments, minimally we have to relocate, I think it was 32 voting locations, one of those being an early voting site, because they're some way connected to a facility with senior citizens. Those are serious issues. We need time to find those relocations with our local partners, and then we have to have time to advertise that, and we have to have time to print and send out new voting cards that alert the voters to those. So it's a lot of moving parts all at one time, and things that we have to take in consideration. What I try to stress to anyone when I'm speaking, not just under these circumstances, elections, you just don't flip a switch and turn them on and turn them off. There is so much preparation in advance that we have to work on, and any clog in the wheel with regards to those preparations causes us severe anxiety, but also could cause us serious issues with the election. We've been blessed to have a strong staff of experienced individuals who have worked for years in this process, and additionally, we're blessed to have strong local partners that team up with us to pull this off. We are concerned that we may end up with issues of drayage. It was brought to my attention that just one of our drayage companies has filed for unemployment. And if they're not a functioning entity by the time the election gets here, then we have a problem getting the machines to the polls. We depend upon the locals to open up those facilities, and our commissioners in charge. We're working on the logistics of social distancing. We're in the process of obtaining information from our clerks and our registrars about social distancing necessary in order to conduct voting. We think we will be there by the time we need to, but all of that information has to be dealt with by May 1st. So a lot of issues.
Secretary, aren't a lot of these things, and I tried to jot down some of them as you were talking through them, I guess I'm a little confused as to why you have to have an emergency plan to deal with some of these issues. What prevents you right now in current statute, the way it is right now, from providing hand sanitizer or PPE, or making sure that you have enough poll commissioners, to do the job that you need to do, or ordering more scanners or paper, or even relocating voting locations? What is it that prevents you from doing that right now, from having the authority to do all of those things right now?
Well, the reason for certification of the emergency and emergency plan is to clearly outline how we would currently conduct elections under the circumstances. For example, the CDC is sent out through CISA recommendations on how to conduct elections amid COVID-19. One of those recommendations is that you spread out early voting if you're able to do so. In spreading out the time frame, you spread out theoretically, you spread out voters being able to pick the times that they go, rather than coalescing over a 7-day period in larger numbers. those are some of the things that we have to deal with logistically on that, whether it's early voting or in-person voting on election day. We have to have the materials to be able to do that. We have to be able to find that. Some of the things that are in the plan with regards to the logistics is that right now we, under other previous disasters, as you can tell with Katrina, as in my remarks, there was a whole separate process for absentee requests because it was a more broad reason needing that. We felt like we needed a broader scope of allowing for people to request an absentee ballot under reasons for COVID that I provided you all. So a strong example of that is if we didn't have the COVID absentee request form and we didn't list out the illnesses. A great example is my daughter, who is a type 1 diabetic, who is completely susceptible to this disease, this virus. There's nothing on the current absentee ballot request form that allows her. She will be in the state. She will be in her precinct. She just has a health issue. So she would not be able to request an absentee ballot. So that necessitates a different form, which necessitates an emergency certification. The law doesn't allow me to create anything outside of the current absentee ballot form. That's it.
But the first things that you mentioned, the law would allow you to provide hand sanitizer and PPE and poll commissioners and secure enough scanners that you need. I mean, all of those things you could do under the current authority that you have.
My staff has reminded me that polling commissioners are chosen, and for the vast majority were already, of the parishes, were already chosen. So it's a random lot of how they're chosen. And with regards to that, if they've already been chosen, then they've already been sent their letters and received acceptance. So if they stop inside that process and decide I'm not going to come in, then we have the alternates that we've already chosen, and when we run out of that, we're out. The law would require us to go back to redo the process. Additionally, we have timeframes that we have to meet in choosing those that are set forth in the law, and thus, even though we extended the dates, it didn't extend us the opportunity to meet those deadlines. So some of those deadlines we change in the plan. I'm trying to think of another example.
I would imagine that could be included in another executive order if that was again, the opportunity to solicit new poll commissioners. I would assume that could be done through executive order as the delay of the elections has been.
We also have the time frame of which we have to train them, and we've had the challenges of how do we seek new polling, because across the board everybody's like, okay, we need to recruit new commissioners, and that's true. I would love to, and I look forward to that, and we're working towards that. We've actually even had some private citizens come in to create this opportunity for us, but we have to train them, and they have to have a certification. So there's a certification process by which they have to go through. So it's not a quick process. It's an elongated process. And now under this environment, we have to figure out how we're going to train them because we can't do it in person. I don't know if you've ever been to any of those. I've been to many of them, and they are held in, for example, in St. Tammany, the clerk, Ms. Henry, she provides for a large facility at a church community center. I think Christ the King is and we're talking probably 300-400 people at one time with a large stage and a large sound system. So now we've got to figure out how do we create videos to train our commissioners in a way that one, they get the message that we're trying to do to provide them, but also the details that they're going to need to pay attention. It's not a quick process. It's not an easy process, but we're dependent upon those paid volunteers.
All right, any questions or comments, further comments about the emergency certification document from the member, Senator Reese?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So tell me a little bit about the commissioner training again on that piece of it. So, how long is the training? Is it 2 10-hour sessions? Is it 1 2-hour session? Is it
Sherry Hatsky, Commissioner of Elections with the Secretary of State's office.
Sherry, I'm sorry, get closer to the microphone.
Sorry. There are 2 certifications that they would have to go to. The first one is the general certification course. It can last anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending upon the number of people that are there, the questions that are asked. You go through all of the forms that are provided during Election Day, your general supply forms, affidavits, et cetera. They're trained on that information. Then they go to a pre-election course of instruction. That's critical for this election, especially because the PPP, as you know, presents the Republican and Democrat and the separation of the ballots. So they're having to understand how to work the machines, operate the machines to give the person the right ballot with lockout notes. And then if you add the 24 parishes that have local elections, that's another lockout note. Some of them had 14 lockout notes. And to understand that as a commissioner and to make sure you're providing the right ballot requires the training.
so? But with all of that, it's still 2 to 4 hours.
Yes.
One day.
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes more than that. There's the first course is one class, and then 30 days out from the election is the second course, the pre-election course of instruction.
Okay. What about? Can you talk to the date spread that you've chosen, and the timeline that we may be up against, and as it relates to the need to our timeline to approve a plan to address it?
Sure, and let me add one other thing, if I may, prior to answering that question, is that without certifying an emergency and then providing a plan, I couldn't expand early voting without it. Nor could we change the process of choosing commissioners without either of these. So with regards to your question and the strange timeline, so the July 11th and then the spread to August 15th provides for something that Louisiana has never experienced before. If we have an uptick higher than usual, let's say higher than the usual absentee ballot request for the presidential, which is about 64,000. So for the biggest we've ever had, and understand that the maximum percentage of absentee ballots that we've ever had in the state is 3.7%. So that's very minuscule, and I had numerous warnings from other secretaries of state who are in predominantly mail ballot states that be careful when you have such a low percentage. Moving to a new system is an absolute danger. So the timeline that we built into it that Louisianians would not be used to is holding all early voting and election day results, and then allowing us up to a 2-week period to scan and tabulate all the paper ballots. So we're giving us a typical framework of the other states work in that are majority mail ballot, which is additional time to make sure that we are able to count those ballots timely and work through any issues. Each parish board of election supervisors has to look at the challenges, and they would basically go into meetings each day that's required. And then as parishes compile those results, send it to my office, we quarantine those results until every parish is finalized, and then we would announce the unofficial results and then have the parish board certify to me their individual parish's results. So it's merely a counting mechanism for us. And the pushback overall, leading to one of the logistical problems is, again, the supply chain. We would have to lease or purchase larger scanners in order for a higher volume of absentee ballots.
So what about the July 11 date? Start there. I mean, why could it be August 11th? Could it be August the 15th? I mean, maybe speak to
No, sir,
the
it
exact
could not.
thing that drives that to be the latest
Yeah.
possible date we could vote.
That was the latest possible date that we could go with without taking the second round, the general election round, and moving it to the November ballot. The problem with that is we ran into issues for local governments that have propositions on the general election ballot, and they would not be able to be certified in time for the assessors to utilize those to build those into upcoming tax collections, if you will. So that was the problem we faced. Additionally, the other problem we faced is we even talked about, well, once Senator Sanders withdrew, did we need to really have to have the presidential preference primary? The answer to that is yes, for several reasons. One, the parties had to have to determine how delegates are allocated, and they can't be allocated if there's not been any expressed will of the people in the state, whether by caucus or election. The second thing is that the Democratic Parish Executive Committees and the Republican Parish Executive Committees and the Democratic State Central Committee requires, under current law, that they be elected at and on the election of the presidential preference primary. If you don't have those elections, then you run into a problem that, one, their term ends, and then each PEC, whether Republican or Democrat, has an appointment to the Parish Board of Election Supervisors. And if there is no PEC, then how do they have members? We were putting the Parish Board of Election Supervisors in jeopardy.
That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Reese. Senator Fall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for procedural purposes, are we going to finish discussion on this and then go to the plan second?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll wait till we get to the plan. That's where I have some questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, Senator Price? On those, we're trying to focus on the certification. We may not take action on this. We'll go into the other document first. But
Okay.
you have questions
Well,
on
my
the
question is
certification
along the
itself?
same line as Senator Fall, so I'll wait till we get to that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions about the certification and the need to certify that this is an emergency and the justification for doing that? Because I think at the end of the day, if I read this right, it's in the now that wherefore at the end, you're recommending that the governor, the Senate Committee on Governmental Affairs, the House Committee on Governmental Affairs concur that the emergency plan is necessary and authorize you to develop an emergency plan. And as you said earlier, you collapsed all of those steps into one step. But that would be a separate action that we would need to take at some point. Okay. Why don't we move on then? I don't see any other questions on the board related to the emergency certification. Let's move on then to the next agenda item, which talks about the emergency plan itself that you're proposing. Mr. Secretary, would you like to? Excuse me one second. Senator Price?
Yeah. For clarification, you just say that we have to approve both plan, we have to approve the documentation requesting the emergency plan also?
Yes.
So that's what we just finished, so do we need to approve that now all together? How are we going to do that?
I'd rather wait and do it all together, and let's consider kind of what action we want to take at the end after we've talked about the plan, if that would be all right with the committee.
Okay.
But I won't forget. Don't let me forget.
Thank you.
I won't.
All right, now the secretary's got that. Okay. All right, because they go kind of hand in hand together, and so I just want to say let's just look at this all as a package. Okay, Mr. Secretary, let's move on then to the emergency plan itself. Would you like to walk through that, or?
However, whatever your preference is, Madam Chair, Chairwoman. So whatever's easiest for the committee to do. If you want to go section by section,
That's
or you want me to hit the high points.
It's-
Well, I hit the high points in my talk.
yeah, you kind of hit the high points. I mean, why don't we kind of walk through this? What's the pleasure of the committee? I know everyone's read it and you've looked at it. Would you like to just ask questions, or would you like to ask the secretary to kind of walk through the different sections? Because there's a lot in this document. You want to go right to questions? All right. Okay. All right. So, Senator Foyle, would you like to start us off? We'll
Thank
talk
you, Madam
about-
Chair. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Morning, Senator.
I do agree that this is an emergency situation, and I appreciate your efforts, but I do have some questions and some concerns about the plan I want to go over with you.
Absolutely.
So, first off, currently, under current law, if you want to request an absentee ballot, how is that done?
You submit the request to the Registrar of Voters, providing the required information on the request and once that checks out at the local level, the registrar's level, then they mail the request.
And
Ballot.
how does this
They mail the ballot.
plan different from that?
It simply adds an additional form under the emergency conditions that we exist.
But you would still have to request the ballot in the same process that you do now.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then let me ask you, and I think you've answered my question, but I just want to clarify. On the early voting, I know you're recommending early voting for these elections. I know you said a lot of people utilize early voting, but are the weekends really the surge time, or how is this going to help?
It helps simply for spacing out the time frame of which those voters would utilize early voting, so that you don't have as many going in that time frame that we currently have of 7 days. The theory, if you will, coming from the federal government is that you spread out and fewer people are congregating at the same time.
Now, is this something that you're advocating for just for the coronavirus, or is this something you think is a policy that you
No,
recommend
sir.
we look at?
Only for this emergency plan, only for this election.
And let me briefly go over on page 8 the reasons that someone would request one of these ballots. It appears to me that some of these, of course, are specific to someone who has the coronavirus and cannot leave their home and their quarantine, which is, I guess, similar to what we already have is hospitalization, but this expands it to cover those particular situations since someone may not be in the hospital, correct?
Correct.
But you also put one of the conditions down as unable to appear in public due to concern of exposure to or transmission of COVID-19, which really could lead to everyone in Louisiana just voting by mail.
It is. I don't disagree that it is broad. It is not my preference, but it is an agreement that I felt that we had with the administration in order to have the approval of this plan.
So part of this is, and I'm learning as we go along too, you negotiated this plan with the administration, so this is not all things that you necessarily initially proposed.
No, sir. I initially proposed, I think it was six reasons, not 8.
And then one other question I had, if you look at page 9, it says, in addition to requesting to receive an absentee ballot by mail, voters may alternatively request to receive an absentee ballot by fax with waiver of right to secret ballot. Well, if it's simply a request, why is there a necessity for a waiver of a right of secret ballot? Because they're not going to know how they vote just by requesting, right? It's the second to last paragraph on page 9.
Because to return that ballot, it has to be returned by facsimile. If you receive it by facsimile, it's got to be returned by facsimile, and thus when it's returned by facsimile to the Registrar of Voters, whoever is receiving that ballot at the facsimile machine is going to see how that individual voted until they put it into a prepared envelope and sealed to be presented to the Board of Election Supervisors for acceptance.
So if you receive the ballot by fax, you can't just put it in the regular mail to return it?
You can, but the problem with that is that the voter does not have the appropriate envelope with the return flap that has to be filled out, and so that the likelihood of that ballot surviving the challenge process is more than remote.
Well, in a sense, since the main thing it seems like we're addressing are people who cannot leave their homes to go vote, why do we need this addition, do you believe? The facts, that's a change in law?
No, sir. We offer the fax to individuals who are hospitalized, to military and overseas voters, as well as voters with physical disabilities.
That's all the questions I have, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Price?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for all you're doing in trying to make sure that people get the right to vote. My question is related to that. How are we going to get this information? How's your office going to get this information out now to the public that we've made some changes, that you can be 60 years old and request an absentee ballot? And if you're in the hospital, how are we going to try to get this information out to the public?
Public notices in the newspapers, the journals that we have. Additionally, we'll utilize our social media, whatever monies that we can pull together to put out public service announcements like we've done in the past. I'll do media interviews, radio stations. We typically put out public service announcements on the radio. We also put out press releases. And we post signs at polling locations. We do a whole number of things. And then one thing that we want to implement, should this plan be approved, is what was done during Katrina, where we put up signs all around with regards to our toll-free number to call for people to inquire as to how they can exercise their right to vote.
Thank you. That was my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Milligan?
Well, thank you, Secretary. I recognize that, especially through reading through this, that your job with the elections and protecting the sanctity of elections is a tremendous task. And it does take a lot of forethought and a lot of work. And obviously what you're trying to do is, on first and foremost, making sure that we've got the equipment and the personnel. And that obviously takes time. And certainly PP&E is an issue. The heartburn that I have is related to simply the expansion of the absentee ballots. It is extremely broad and basically covers everybody in Louisiana, and so anybody could say, "Hey, I'm scared to death," and they can absentee vote. There is not an election cycle that goes through that we don't wake up to the news that votes are found in somebody's garage or somebody's trunk.
Outside of the state, right?
Yeah. I'm hoping that's the case.
That is the case.
But and look, your office has done tremendous work to make sure that we don't have that. When we're looking at COVID as it is now, prayerfully, we're moving in a positive direction, and obviously we have 3 months until election, and I know that absentee ballots have to be requested 4 days in advance, right? So that's July 7th. It seems like when you're trying to balance, and it's a weighty decision, but you're trying to balance the safety of the folks in Louisiana and the right to vote with the worry of COVID, it seems like a situation where we're looking at any reason to expand absentee ballots would be more of a trigger mechanism in this, to where if we continue on our positive trend, then the ability to vote by absentee may have to be used. But if we're going to use that, wouldn't it seem like we would consider at the time those patients who are hospitalized, thankfully on the decline, and those patients that have been diagnosed with COVID and asked to stay at home, those folks can provide documentation that says, hey, I have a legitimate reason to absentee vote. and be able to furnish that versus going out there and saying, hey, we want to, these 8 measures, we want to basically give everybody the right. It seems like the balance in that circumstance is going to favor, yes, it has the potential to help folks, but we're going out with this. It seems like we are opening ourselves to more risk and fraud than ever. I'm also afraid that if we expand the measures that are here, what's going to be the next case where we have to expand them again? I think that when we're looking at these things and you're looking at this massive list of anybody and everybody, our heart goes out to those individuals. But are we willing to risk the reputation of the election process in the state of Louisiana when we can simply say, hey, for those who are hospitalized and those that are proven COVID, who can provide documentation, do so and request the ballot and it can be mailed? First question.
Well, first and foremost, my intent, and I think you all know my heart in this process is, and the conviction I have about our system. I don't believe I'm proposing anything that puts our system at risk. I certainly can understand people's perceived belief of risk. But let me just give you an example on today's general application. I am or expect to be temporarily outside the territorial limits of my state or parish of registration during the early voting period and on election day, and then you must indicate the time frame. Now, we don't run around checking on people if they're in town on election day, and I'm pretty certain people have broadly used this option for an absentee ballot. I think that's no more broad than what we're proposing in terms of this very limited situation and circumstances that we are under. Obviously, I think we can all agree that what we are living through today has never been thought of in our generation, if you will. And so I'm tasked constitutionally with providing the opportunity for every citizen to express their will through their vote with every opportunity that's possible, that's within our controls and within the law. And so my job was to present, given our previous history, because I tasked my staff with how do we answer those questions of individuals who are fearful of going out. If I don't have the COVID application, regardless of whether it's all 8, there's nothing on the current form that takes care of the situation that I enumerated earlier with my own child. So, we are very strict, and albeit she is an adult on her own, she's 20, soon to be 21, but we are drilled into her head the circumstances by which it only takes one exposure and she could end up in a situation where her life is threatened. This is all very sensitive. And I'm certainly, I'm trying to be very measured with my words. As the Chief Elections Officer, I am charged with providing every opportunity that we can for individuals to exercise their right to vote in a measured way, in a way of taking into account potential opportunities for fraud. To me, the if you will, COVID absentee application provides me a secure feeling in that our processes will be continued to be followed, in that the individual filling out the application, one, has to certify that all the information is true. If not, and it's challenged, then that individual could face a fine and potential prison. Additionally, they have to have the identifying information that they know to be true, in fact, They have to have their mother's maiden name. They have to put in their social security number, and they have to sign it. And our process on the local level is that when the application is received, all that information is checked and the signature is compared. I do not at this time have an electronic way to beef that system up because I don't have the time for development, and I would have to obtain a higher resolution of those signatures. But I do have faith in our local partners in our process that they could follow and would follow the appropriate steps that we do today to make sure and to cut down on potential fraud.
And I appreciate that. I too have a high risk younger daughter that I worry about, and we have worked very hard. In fact, I know my wife's going to kill me when I get home because she's sitting here watching. I don't have my mask on, but there is plenty of distance. But you know, when you look at those, and look, our job today isn't here to make your job harder. We're trying to find some common ground to help, because we do have the concerns and care for all of our citizens. But when you're looking at the measures that are here to broaden absentee ballot, on top of that, under that you're having to waive the requirement the requirement of having to vote in the previous election for this to work. It's really a tough situation.
That I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
That waiving is only for first-time voters.
Okay, first time voters.
Only first-time voters.
Forgive me.
No, I just want y'all.
Well, and I just was looking at
There's
it.
so
while we
many
were visiting.
details to all of this.
There is.
And you realize that I just don't want that you all to miss any of those that we take for granted on a regular basis. So I apologize for
No, it's
interrupting.
okay. It's all right. You know, if we get to July and this COVID is still a serious issue, and I'm praying it's not,
Amen.
and this state is still in stay-at-home mode, the elections will be the last thing that we have to worry about. It'll be that dire for this state. As a measure that we are taking now with pushing back the dates, which makes sense, right? With expanding early voting to be able to not have crowds, to be able to continue social distancing measures and having masks and wipes, that is a huge positive step to be able to help folks vote safely. Looking at the individual list of conditions here, I still feel like when you're considering those that absolutely can't make it, those hospitalized, those that are home quarantined because they have it, you can prove that situation exists. The rest of it is more of a feeling, and I understand that they're fearful. I'm hoping that's not the case in July. And so I'm really worried about the risk inherent for your office, for our voting, for the sanctity of our elections. The other issue when it comes to that, and you've said it yourself, when you look at that huge group that can absentee vote, it's going to explode the number of absentee votes counted and the equipment that's needed and the cost and the people. I have serious worry about a period of 2 weeks after the election where we can't provide the election returns and what that's going to do to the folks that doubt our election process. And I understand that's no one's fault. It's just the sheer volume. But that's a huge concern. Being able to whittle down these broad measures to those folks that absolutely can't make it should shorten that list and be able to possibly provide election results the same day, or if not the next day, which I think would go a long way. Is that the possibility? You're shaking your head. No,
I don't believe so. I think you're setting us up for failure. I think you're setting us up for even more concerns that the results are not valid. And I hate to bring this up, but I mean, we have a senator who sat here who dealt with an issue with paper ballots, and I felt his concern all the way through, and it boiled down to just a few ballots, but it also boiled down to us having to really focus and make certain that process worked properly, and I believe it did. But when you when you add more to the mix, 2 days is not enough. I mean, we'd have to have much more expensive equipment to be able to get it done in that time frame. But I hear everything you're saying. This is not how I want to hold
Understand.
elections.
Understand.
I'm just trying to figure out a way to balance the concerns of citizens and the phone calls that we get from average citizens that are worried about them contracting this horrible virus that could lead to death for our vulnerable populations, and we get the calls a lot. So we were trying to build it. I took out, look, the song and dance of vote by mail has been loud, but I took that out, and I took out the other side, and I focused in on, okay, staff, where are we and how can we utilize and beef up our policies and procedures and our processes and really come to some sort of balancing act to make this work. And I think we're here, but I absolutely hear every bit of your concerns because I have those same concerns. I just had to provide you all a plan as best I could, and I'm hearing your input, and I have to also balance 3 political bodies, if you will. I don't mean to refer to the governor as a political body, but I have to have his consent and your consent and the House's consent. So in order to balance all that, that was what we came up with. But I hear you loud and clear.
Well, and we're just being devil's advocate because we are looking at both sides and certainly want to be able to help
Sure.
you. I'm just going to, one more concern, and
Please.
really that's what these are, and then I'm gonna be quiet because I'm sure there's other questions. Another concern I have is related to the absentee voting in the nursing homes. Again, prayerfully, and it's speculation. Come July, our nursing homes will be, at least family members should be able to attend. I have a big issue with just letting anyone help with absentee voting in the nursing homes. I feel like family by that time certainly should have access to be able to be there to help their loved one, nursing home and veterans homes to be able to help their loved ones. But certainly if it comes down to somebody having to assist, in the document that I read, it was basically any staff member, anybody there. It seems like it needs to be somebody of official capacity in the nursing home to certify that they helped the nursing home resident and the veterans resident make that choice.
So we wrote it in such a way that only if the restrictions on visitation remain in place, then those voters, which are 792 voters statewide, then those voters could use the staff inside the nursing home to assist them. But the way this is written, that's the only case in which they would be able to. If the restrictions are lifted, then the family members would have to help. The staff would not be able to.
Okay. Madam Chairwoman, I'll be quiet. I'll yield. I have more questions, but thank you. I'm really just trying to comfort myself in this because I'm just having a hard time with the very broad. I feel you, and I want to be able to provide everybody the ability to vote, the right to vote. We want to make sure that happens, but we also want to balance it with the sanctity of our election process, and I know you feel the same way.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Senator Milligan. I'm going to kind of follow through on a couple of questions, a couple of follow-ups from what some of my colleagues have asked. You said earlier, you said the word danger, that your colleagues had cautioned you about the danger when moving to a new system. And I wanted to a little better understand what you meant by that, because it feels like we're moving to a new system. So my alarms were going off when you said that.
Sure. So the issue is, I'll use my friend in Washington State, Secretary of State Kim Wyman, who I have leaned upon a lot in this process of making determinations on how we move forward. and how we might be able to do that in a secure way. Danger may have been a too strong of a term, but there are inherent barriers that you have to overcome when you're increasing the number of paper ballots in the process. So her state, the state of Washington, moved to an all-mail program when they were at a point of 60% of absentee ballots. And so it was a natural progression for them over time. But it took them 5 years to work through all the issues in order to get to the position where they are today. And she just simply issued the concerns or the warning that it is not easy as it appears. And in an email to the author of the legislation in the House that promotes that, I expressed to her that that is not the panacea to what we are dealing with today. We can't just flip a switch and move into that. There are, as Senator Milligan brought up in his questions, concerns with how that would be implemented, how broad it could be perceived, the equipment issues, the secure paper that has to be utilized that can't be duplicated, and other issues.
Signature verification.
Signature verification being the number one, because just take, for example, today, the signature that we have on file for every registered voter is a low resolution. So it requires the naked eye to look at it and to compare. I could not put that in an automatic process because I would have to literally beef up our development to have a system or buy a separate system to run these applications through to compare the signatures. But I'd also have to go into the Office of Motor Vehicles, and I'd have to have access to every single person who has a license and that signature that's on file at that resolution, because it's a higher resolution. I don't have time to do that. Not for this election, not for November. The time frame and how that works is probably several years down the line.
So I think you're making the point, though. So when you're going from your estimate of 60,000 mail-in ballots to 360,000, that's 6 times as many by your own estimates.
I'm not
Aren't
making
you
that.
concerned about the integrity of the system when we
I'm always-
open it up that quickly? We don't have 5 years.
I'm always looking at the integrity of the system, and I didn't make an argument at all. What I stated was plain truth, and that is what we do today, and that is when an absentee ballot request comes in, that information is compared to what we have in the system, and the signature is compared by sight. Would that require additional personnel? Absolutely. But I'm making, in the plan, I'm requiring that we bring in additional personnel in each registrar's office to assist with that process. But remember, we're not talking a total concentration. We're talking about this spread out across the state. So you've got 64 registrars. Do I think there's going to be a slightly higher concentration in Orleans than in Acadia? Yes, that's a reality, because there are more voters in Orleans than there are in Acadia. But it's a process that we already know how to work, and our locals are working them. And I trust that they would continue to do that process, and under my direction and insistence, they would.
So how do we, like you mentioned, I guess I am very interested in the signature comparisons. So part of the process, I think, is for COVID reasons, it says on page 9, the request for, I guess it's an absentee ballot, may be submitted online through the Go Vote online portal. in addition to the statutory reasons to request an absentee ballot by mail. So how on the online going through Go Vote, which I've not done that before, ask for an absentee ballot, how do you manage the signature issue on that?
You have to have your license audit code to be entered to validate that. That's how you even register to vote online. You have to have that audit code that's on your license to be able to do that.
Okay, I don't know what that is. We all have a number on our license?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're saying you would enter that in?
You enter that in, and that correlates into our system because we have that recorded into our system and we validate it with OMV data.
You also have to have date of birth and
Yeah, you have to have the date of birth. You have to have the proper name. You have the date of birth, social security number, and the audit code.
Okay, so I would request that online. You'd be able to confirm I am who I am because of that information that I would input into that online request. And then how do I receive my ballot?
It would be mailed to the address on file, unless there was a different requested address and then we would have to verify that why you're entering that address.
Okay, and let's see, if I request a ballot, I guess by mail, one of the things that we're doing is we're waiving the requirements for 2 witness signatures on that request. Is that correct?
No, ma'am, that's incorrect. So
That's on the fourth paragraph on page 9.
That's only for the person making their mark.
right.
Okay, so there's 2 conditions there. So the person who is making the request signs it, and that's that plus all the other identifying information we use to make sure that person is who they say they are. What we are waiving is for an individual who is unable to write, who can only make a mark. Under today's circumstances, they have to have 2 witnesses. We're taking that down to 1 witness. One of the things that we have been faced with and a lot of concerns is how does an individual find a witness if we're still under the same circumstances that we are today? So I can only imagine how difficult it would be for an individual if they live alone to be able to find 2 witnesses. So we just simply made it 1 witness because someone's got to witness that individual made their mark since they don't have a signature.
Okay. I guess what, and I'm going to go through a couple of these things. I guess what concerns me a little bit is that it feels like to me like we're backing off a little bit on some of the things that we've put in place to handle our normal mail-in ballot, absentee ballot system that we have reasonable confidence in and has worked well for us for many years. And we're kind of softening some of those requirements because of the COVID absentee ballots. So we don't have a different set of rules for the COVID ballots and the other ballots. We've sort of softened some of those requirements because of the COVID, some of the checks and balances that I felt like that we had in place. And so, again, that goes back to the integrity of the system. For example, I think it was mentioned earlier with one of the other senators about if you register by mail for the first time, you normally, by our current rules, you have to vote in person and be able to show your ID and all that. And we're waiving that for these 2 elections. So it could be that, I think you're doing it, I would assume, for COVID reasons, but yet it's going to apply to everyone that's registering for the first time and voting for the first time.
True, but understand that we have 88% of all eligibles already registered to vote in the state. So we're not looking at a very large number of folks overall that are left to be registered.
So you also wouldn't be, you could argue that the other way, then you're not, and how many of those are going to have a COVID issue that would necessitate waiving the requirement to vote in person the first time?
Sure, we took into account with with our legal team those issues that might arise as quick litigation issues. And so that's why we've relaxed some of these issues.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the legal aspect of it.
We're trying to prevent being sued
Okay.
very quickly and by lots of organizations, that we're preventing individuals under these circumstances from being able to exercise their right. That's why we've come up with the plan that we've come up with.
Okay, help me understand the kind of hand
Yeah.
delivering of
I'm
ballots.
sorry. Let me help out with a little bit, if you don't mind, the previous question. So, understand that we're attempting to retain as much of our current procedures as possible, with the idea of expanding our absentee and early voting in order to prevent our voters from being disenfranchised by circumstances today that are beyond their control. Under normal circumstances, we would never recommend relaxing any of these because we believe in the system that we have. With regard to first-time voters, they have already been verified through the process. So either they've submitted a paper application, of which if the registrar has any concerns, that they send a notice to them and they have to come to their office to deal with that issue, or provide additional documentation. If you register online, which is now, I believe, the predominant way everyone registers, you are already verified in that very process, because only technically you have your Social Security number, you have your mother's maiden name, and you have the audit code. If you don't have any of those three, you're not going to verify. And that's a HAVA, that's a federal process that we go through. And we can't change that even if we wanted to. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just thought that was important for you to have.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, let's talk about how the ballots get returned, the voted ballots get returned. I think you talked about if you ask for it to be faxed to you, the ballot, I guess you faxed in your request for a ballot, the ballot would be faxed back to you. I mean, how do you prevent from having somebody at a fax machine just faxing and receiving tons of requests and getting tons of ballots back?
Each fax application has to have the fax number on it, and you're limited to one. Because we have seen, as an example, in previous, under normal circumstances, where registrars were getting a lot of requests via the fax. And when they looked at it, they realized, oh, there's something funny about this. So they called our elections compliance unit. We investigated, and it's part of our issue with some of our legislation. It was coming from a campaign office. They just weren't. Well, I'll just stop there. We
So you have
we
provisions
investigate.
in your process, I mean, because it could come from anybody's
Right.
fax machine. So you have provisions in your process. Again, I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the process by which, these fax numbers or something are getting compared, and that you're only getting one ballot from one fax machine, I guess is what you're saying?
We don't get very many faxes. No.
We don't get very many of those, but correct. The one request per fax machine, if you will. If more than one comes in, then we're going to investigate it.
And how does it work for the email thing? If you're requesting things, a ballot by email, and you're emailing your ballot back.
It's not email.
Military and overseas.
Yeah, that's military and overseas.
Or emergency workers, it says in this document.
That's correct, all which is current law.
Right.
Okay.
So for those individuals, for those first responders, if you will, for Entergy workers or DEMCO or whoever, if they leave the state to assist with a natural disaster on the East Coast, then we make sure they understand that if there's an election coming up, that those individuals can request a ballot via that mechanism so that they are enfranchised. Because it was out of their control being forced by work to leave the state.
So they have to leave the state, so it's not like emergency workers that, are here on the job every day in Baton Rouge
No, ma'am.
or...
No, ma'am. No, it has to be a declared emergency. Correct.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And so that's all handled on the same voting absentee ballot request form. There's information that would be provided on that from a emergency worker, so you would know that their situation.
Picture of the flap, and that's the.
No, that's not on. No. Okay, so for those individuals under those circumstances, if it is an email, then they have to provide all the basic information that's requested on the form inside that email in order to receive their ballot request.
And is there a signature on that? Are those signatures on the emails?
No,
And
not a physical signature, electronic signature, if you will.
so that's a little
But you
harder
still-
to verify that it's the person that you say it is.
But you still have to, don't you have to put the emergency, the declared emergency?
Yeah,
You have to denote the declared emergency, and you still have to provide date of birth, mother's maiden name, your social security number, your driver's license number, et cetera.
And they can be challenged.
And that's current law. And those ballots can be challenged. Any ballot can be challenged for cause.
But that would likely be from the people that are working on the election board, right, would be the ones in a position to be able to make a challenge.
A registered voter can go in and state to the registrar that they wish to challenge a ballot, and then the registrar has to take information as to why that individual is challenging that ballot and present that ballot and those reasons to the parish board. Only the parish board can successfully challenge, if you will, a ballot. In other words, keep it from being counted,
Okay.
or a court.
And why are we waiving the witness signature on the absentee mail ballot envelope flap?
Well, we wrote it in a unique way so that we're not encouraging that, but we are allowing it because we are getting questions now and concerns from voters who aren't able to get out of their home to seek that witness.
So, again, these are all things that normally we would do under our current system that we are softening up a little bit because of the COVID thing and trying to make it, easier for those folks to be able to vote.
I mean, if you're a 65 and older individual, like my mother-in-law, who's secluded in her assisted living facility and has the beginnings of dementia, I mean, she may fear, out of paranoia, allowing anybody in to witness it. Now, of course, I could go and witness it for her, and then I could turn in the ballot for her. But I think you're going to find that there are some individuals out there who have challenges with regards to that, or fear of allowing someone in to even witness their ballot. Certainly, we're not encouraging it. The way we've written it is that we're asking the board not to challenge it for cause if the ballot comes back without that witness signature on the flap. Again, not my preference, but we are dealing with times that are very extenuating circumstances that don't make sense to any of us. These just aren't normal times.
Yeah, and you know, back to Senator Milligan's earlier point, you know, it'd be great if we had a crystal ball and we could know exactly where we're going to be in July or August, and we could make a call prior to that yes, we are still in an emergency situation, or no, we're not. And if the answer is no, we're not, then everybody's capable of voting under our current rules, our current process that we have developed and fine-tuned over the years and have more confidence in. And so, you know, I do like his thought process on that, and I don't know what we can put into this emergency plan that would give us the flexibility. I understand that you have to, you know, order some equipment and do some things to prepare. I would assume that's all equipment that you could use in the future for just processing mail-in ballots in general. You still need scanners and you still need special paper, and I doubt that those things are going to go to waste. But, you know, it would be nice to know that you could, you know, move back to a situation where you say, okay, in April 14th, 15th, we thought that this could be an emergency and we're preparing for the worst, but the worst hasn't happened, and we'd like to be able to put the emergency plan to the side and go with our normal election process that's prescribed in statute.
I certainly wish we had that luxury. I certainly wish I had that crystal ball that you described. We don't have the luxury. We have to act now for what we don't know, unfortunately. I would, and I think you and I discussed this, I can't even remember, was it yesterday? You know, there's
The days
nothing.
have been long and
I
they
know,
run
right?
together.
We wish that there was a process inside the emergency law that would allow me to decertify the emergency that I certified, but there isn't. There's no reverse. So because I have no reverse, I'm having to ask for this at this time. If I had a reverse and we were in July and we're back to normal circumstances, then I'd put it in reverse and I'd go back to the normal process. But understand, I'd still would have to count any of these ballots that came in, just as we are holding ballots that people sent in for the April 4th election, because those ballots are still valid. And we've notified by letter each of those voters so that they know that they don't have to get another ballot, that ballot is still going to be counted even though it has the date of April 4th election on it.
Have you considered, and I think we talked about this too, the possibility of maybe the COVID absentee ballot request form is not accessible until some date in the future. It's not accessible upon approval of the emergency plan, but it's accessible, let's say, pick a date, June the 1st or something, again, by which you would be able to, you know, it would be available, assuming that all the reasons why you believed at the time today that there's an emergency, if those situations don't exist come whatever that date is, then again, that ballot is not available. So you wouldn't have the case of people sending in ballots today with the COVID thing right away, that would be something that would be done later in the process, still with appropriate amount of time, you know, for everyone to be able to do that and to work it through the process. But it would be, you know, a way, again, to try to, so much changes in a week's time. As I said earlier, we've only been at this for 5 weeks. The first case was reported 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks from now, things are going to look completely different than they do today. And we're talking about something like 3 months until July 11th. So it's a significant amount of time. And it would be nice if we had a few more options and levers where we could say, yes, we have an emergency, or no, we don't.
And that's certainly something we can, you know, take into consideration in the future. You know, understand we are, how many weeks?
We are exactly, test and seal is in 6 weeks.
So we're performing test and sealing in 5 weeks on the machines, and then prior to that, we have to be ready to roll out early voting in advance, and we have to figure out how many, all the logistics that we're going to have in terms of the number of commissioners in order for social distancing. I just, at some point I've got to ask, trust me, it's a lot bigger than what you're seeing. And it's hard to explain unless you've actually gone through the process. Running for office is never what people think it is until they do it. And we all learn that the hard way. So I'm just understand there's a lot of things that we just can't, not that we can't explain, it just takes so much detail to explain. We could be here for hours and hours. But I hear what you're saying, and I hear that concern, and I know that we discussed it in our 4-hour meeting because you and I discussed it, and so I brought up that concern, and I just can't recall exactly why we didn't put a date
On that, well,
on it.
first of all, we have to we have to reprogram all of the machines for the correct date, the voting machines and the ballots, our AVC ballots currently right now that were on the machines in March, because the warehouses are unair conditioned, they're going to have to be reprinted. There's a lot of things like that. Another thing that's a big part of this process, the clerks of court at the beginning of the year, they send notifications to 3,982, I believe, precincts to say, are you available for these election dates? And if
Yeah,
you're
but I'm not talking about the election dates. We've already changed the election dates. The governor did that.
She's talking about the date of application for the COVID absentee
COVID
ballot
sort of
request form. And so why would we not have a date in the future, say, and she threw out June 1, I don't know if that works or doesn't work, but why would we not have a future date if we're still under these circumstances? Then it could kick in versus the current requests, since we've moved the election dates all the way to July 11th and August 15th. And I just can't recall that conversation. I don't know if it wasn't a legal issue or what it may have been. My apologies. I'll try to figure that out.
It would be sort of a go, no-go decision whereby you'd say, yes, you can vote absentee by COVID because we still have a COVID issue at that point in time, and let's not have to make the decision today. You can make that decision down the road, but the only way you could do that is by not having COVID ballots already in your system. Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't make the request for the COVID ballots available until a certain date. Plenty of time still for people to vote, and be able to, have a provision in your emergency plan that would say, yes, that's the trigger, and we're going to use the COVID ballot or not, the request form or not, instead of having to make that decision today because it's 3 months from now. So think about that. That would be some of my feedback.
Thank you.
Let me ask you about cost. There's just sort of some general placeholder conversation there about cost, but nothing in writing about what the cost of all this emergency plan would be and who pays for it.
Well, the taxpayers pay for it for sure. And it comes out of the general fund because elections, that's the only way elections are funded. We estimate the cost to be, so a normal election would cost us around right up to $6 million for the two of them. We estimate now we're throwing everything into this, but some of these costs could likely be picked up through some of the federal dollars that have been sent to us. So we're looking at a total cost of about $10 million.
In addition or instead of?
Total. Instead of 6, 10. And just for transparency, our conservative estimated cost, if we mailed every single registered voter in the state a ballot, would be over $12.6 million. For one.
PP.
Just one, not the two together, just one.
And so, what would this look like then? You know, would be, if this emergency plan passed, you would request a budget increase in the budget bill in this legislative session of an increase of $4 million, or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And to your knowledge, then you said something about federal funding, but what?
So we're due to get right at $6.2 million from the stimulus package, the CARE Act that passed the federal government. Right now, it's requiring a $1.3 million match. But in my conversations with the General Counsel for the Senate Appropriations Committee, their intent is that we make that up with in-kind expenditures. So some of these expenditures would account for some of that match requirement. And there's two online seminars this week that my staff will be attending for more details on how to reach that threshold by in-kind contributions and what will apply to it. And I have asked for and still am promoting, as well as all my colleagues across the country, is to remove that 20% match overall.
Okay. All right. Last question. I want to go back to these 6 or whatever they are, 8 things. You said you had 6 initially. I think that was the number, and you added 2 at the request of the governor.
At least 1 at the request of the governor. I think we realized we needed the 60. We had the gap of the 60 to 65 issue. Trying to find.
That's on page 8 on my document. The 8 different reasons.
Yes, ma'am.
So what were the ones that were added then?
So we had at higher risk, the subject to stay home. Actually, in discussions with the governor's office, we had only quarantine or isolation order. Not at his request, but after a lot of questioning and discussion, we added the stay-at-home provision. Then we had the advised by healthcare provider, and then we had experiencing symptoms, and we had the 2 last ones, caring for an individual, caring for a child. Most of these, if not the original 6, were all in some form or fashion in the CARES Act as to how individuals, employees should be treated by HR concerns.
Yeah, I learned about that last night because I was curious about that. I think it's what I learned was the Families First Act, I think, sort of spelled out the situation by which employers should continue to pay their employees for 80 hours of sick leave. You know, and some of this language was in, I think, that part of the act. That was the president's deputy chief of staff called last night to kind of explain that to me, that part of it. So some of that language was in that part of it. You know, I don't think it was specific to elections or anything like that. It had to do with employers paying employees who were sick, and they were trying to describe the circumstances around that.
Sure. What we were trying to do is try to come up with each and every possible situation prior to the unable to appear in public due to concern of exposure or transmission. And rightfully so. Some have suggested to me, you know, we could have that one and not have any others. But my feeling is that when you have this many, the focus should be on what are my real circumstances, and does this fit my real circumstances? That was our goal.
Well, the 3 that I've gotten the most feedback on, I would say, from colleagues and folks in the public, have to do with the 3rd bullet, the subject to stay-at-home quarantine or isolation order. And I believe there's a kind of a lot of misunderstanding about that. So when I talk to you, I understand it to be more like the governor's stay-at-home proclamation, like it's an official thing. And I don't quite know what the quarantine or isolation order looks like in our state, so I'm a little confused by that. But
I'm not necessarily sure what it would look like either, but I know that the governor has the power, as well as the president has the power to quarantine portions of the population. So if that, let's say, things started returning more normal, as we remember it to be, and yet there are pockets of population that it's starting to spike in, and the governor decided or the president decided to quarantine, then that's what that would look like. We were just, again, we don't have a crystal ball, so we're trying to predict what we can't predict.
Right. I guess my feedback to you would be that I think people, when they read it, are not reading it as an official order, like by a governor or a president or some governmental authoritative person that can issue a document that proclaims that. People are interpreting it more as what we would use more loosely, like I'm self-quarantining, or, I think people are using it more as not an official order, but yet something that they've chosen to do. Or, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am.
So perhaps some clarity around that it's more of an official action would help. The other two that I hear a lot about are the one we've talked about a little bit, this one that's the broadest of all, the unable to appear in public that due to concern or exposure to COVID. That's very broad, and pretty much everybody in the state of Louisiana could probably check that box. And then the last one, caring for a child or a grandchild if the child's school or daycare is closed. Well, we believe the schools, will be closed in July and August. Of course, I guess we don't know anything. Maybe they're not. Maybe they'll all be in school all summer. I'm not sure, but again, just feeling the feedback I get is that those are very broad, and there could be opportunities for the children to be cared for in some other way and still allow a person to go vote.
So the thought process is if someone doesn't want to take a risk by bringing their child to vote with them, then they don't have to if they request an absentee ballot. I certainly understand anybody's apprehension about bringing their children in public, especially if they have a underlying health issue. And if they do, it's not the child's underlying health issue that they get to check the box for. So they're dealing with a child or grandchild, and there are many grandparents who are raising children. So that was pretty much the thought processes that our staff went through.
Okay, the last question is on the very end of your document on page 15 that folks have pointed out to me, and it has to do with some of the judicial elections. In some cases, if a judge is elected to a position, then there'd be other folks that perhaps want to run for that person's seat. So. And it has to do with the timing, and you're talking about this qualifying period for the presidential election, which could also be judicial elections in November. Let's see. Let me back up. The issue of the overlap of qualifying before maybe you have the results of the August election known is of a concern to some of the judicial candidates, because they would have to be in a position without knowing the results of someone else's election.
They're misinterpreting what they're reading.
Whether they're going to be able to qualify for some higher level judicial seat or their current seat.
They're misinterpreting what they're reading. What that says is, what C says is that I will be certifying emergency under 401.1 to the governor to move qualifying from July 15, 16, and 17 to August 19, 20, and 21, which will be between the two national conventions if they're held. and thus the results will be in for the August 15th election by that time.
The August 15th election, will know in 4 days the results of that?
Yes.
It'll be much smaller. It's a much smaller election. It's not, it's what?
It's 51 parishes.
It's 51 parishes, mostly propositions. Some of those parishes only have a few precincts that'll be involved in those elections. So the judicial elections are how many we're looking at?
It was Orleans, East Baton Rouge.
There's a judicial election in Orleans, one in East Baton Rouge, two in East Baton Rouge, and I believe you have one in your parish.
So we believe the results will be known from the August 15th election before this August 19th qualifying period starts.
Right.
But that still has to be done. If I understand the note, there's legislation that would move that qualifying period.
My attorneys believe I have the authority to certify that emergency, and the governor issued the proclamation to do that. But also, we want to go ahead and, should we be able to, also place that temporarily in law to sunset after the effectiveness of that qualifying period.
Okay, so that's been included already in the governor's proclamation, or
Not yet. I have to read. I didn't want to throw too many more at people.
okay. All right, Senator Foyle.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just real briefly, one of my concerns is, I know it's dated April 14th, which is yesterday, this a plan. I believe that's when I first got it. Is that when the public first got it too? Because I'm getting a lot of emails and phone calls this morning on it. I have not had a chance to go review them all, but apparently they have some concerns.
Yes, sir.
And
There was a lot of swirling and rumor and innuendo about what we were proposing, and it got out of hand because there's been a real push coming out of Orleans Parish for vote by mail, and there's legislation, and so there's a lot of assumptions out there without people actually having the ability to actually read this plan. So, and it was just merely the timing. We had hoped to be able to get it out sooner, but we had issues with because of the tornado activity in North Louisiana. It delayed the first certification getting signed off by the governor, although he was there in it with agreement, but we still had to have the proclamation for me to put the appropriate information in my 401.3 certification that you have before you, and thus be able to provide you the plan.
And look,
One
and
of those perfect storms, if you will, no pun intended.
I understand these are crazy times, but it's my understanding if we were to approve this today, a lot of times we'll say, will you work with me between here and the floor? And there's no doing that, right? I mean, once we approve this plan, that's the plan.
That is correct. All I can do is present you a plan with an up or down vote, and if you vote it up and the governor votes it up and the House committee votes it up, then it proceeds to a ballot vote of the members within 5 days, and then it's an up or down there as well. So, some folks have talked to me about, well, this is really just like the Bessie funding formula, and much like, I think, the coastal something or another, where it's up and down, but not really. We'll vote it down, and then we can give you your input. Our concern is that our timelines are very strict, and right now, from our discussions, and we appreciate it very much, our initial discussions, and I'm not holding them to this, but our initial discussions with the secretary and the clerk of the Senate and the House respectively, we would end up with like a 2-day window before we absolutely had to have our orders in for all of our resources, which is our drop dead date is April 24th.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And what are the resources, again, that you have to order by April 24th?
Equipment, the scanning equipment, and the supply of paper is dwindling very fast. So the secure paper.
So obviously you'll have to order some scanning equipment regardless, but you're gonna have to order more scanning equipment. Is that because if this order goes in place?
What we're moving to would be a higher speed, higher capacity scanners than what we have today. So that's why, and there's a supply chain issue. They actually literally will have to be built in order to be here. That's why we have a drop dead date.
That's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Womack?
Okay, thank y'all for the work you've done and the questions that's been asked, a lot of which I've been able to mark through. I'm concerned about the accountability at the end of the day, what it's going to look like on the backside of this for elected officials as well as everybody else. That the emails that I've got in the last 24 hours, I know you've got them for the last 3 or 4 weeks maybe, but the ones that I've gotten in the last 24 hours has got some real heartburn on some of the loosening requirements with absentee votes. It's very wide, and the concern of accountability on the backside of that. And I know there's new equipment coming, possibly, if this thing were to flow through. But have y'all thought about what it's going to really take on that end of it?
Absolutely. I don't think we've slept in how many weeks?
3 weeks. I know.
I wake, I'm lying awake in bed looking at the ceiling, worried about everything we've discussed. But I do have faith in the processes that we have. I do have faith in the locals that we work with. And everyone is taking this seriously. I mean, there's all of our local election officials, whether they're the clerks or the registrars, and their employees are taking this very seriously. And I've had countless conversations with them as individuals, and then we've had conference calls as well. And none of them fear this plan because we feel like we can implement it and have all the checks and balances that we like. We prefer more, but we all feel like, and I shouldn't speak for all, but I've not gotten an overwhelming negative from local election officials on this. Where I've gotten negative phone calls is concerns, obviously, from legislators, and I get it, and political activists on both sides. I mean, the left wants it wider, the right wants it tighter. I must be doing something right. I'm right in the middle. I mean, that's where I was shooting for in the first place. So I've heard everything you all have said. There's not a bit of that we haven't thought about and we haven't been concerned about. But we have faith in the system because this is what we do.
In your assessment, putting this together, have you run any metrics plumb out to the trend that we're seeing in our numbers daily on the COVID as to where we will actually be on the dates that we're looking at here if things are favorable for our state?
And that's, that was the hope, that we would be more towards normal than we are. Just the problem for us is we have to put things into place so far in advance that it doesn't give us that opportunity. And it's like I stated earlier with the Chairwoman Hewitt, I wish there was a mechanism in there that I could decertify the emergency and be able to go back to our normal processes if we get inside that time frame where we could vote early without increased absentee requests. But I don't have that. And, at some point I had to pull the trigger to get to this point, to prepare. The worst thing I can do, the thing I don't want is I don't want to be Wisconsin. And I've said over and over, and I campaigned on this, I don't want to be Broward County either. And I'm very serious about that. And the local election officials know that I'm very serious about that, and that we will have to go through, even if it's so meticulous that, we end up having to hire more people than we realize and the cost goes up. I'd rather go through and have those security mechanisms in place for people verifying those requests on the front end to make sure it's the actual person making the request for that ballot. Does that make sense to you?
Looking at our past elections and looking at our COVID situation, the number of people, how does that compare? I don't think any election's 100%. Everybody doesn't absentee, everybody doesn't go to the polls. So looking at that, what have y'all looked at that to see, what kind of impact are we really looking at with the COVID at the end of the day?
We've had an increase of absentee ballots.
Yeah, we've already seen an increase in absentee ballot requests and returns. As I stated earlier, I believe our highest ever return in absentee ballots was 64,000 plus.
Right.
This, where we are today, is we're already at 30,000.
Okay, with that said, it tells me that people are already doing what they need to do to protect themselves. They're requesting it without these provisions, without loosening the provisions.
Well, these are mostly over 65, so they already have that in today's system. What we don't have are individuals between 60 and 65. So then we don't, and then, individuals with underlying health issues. I mean, there's not a box on here that fits their need because they're not hospitalized. They're certainly not going to be temporarily absent. They're not offshore. We have the nursing home program. Clergy or moved out of the parish or, I don't have all the check boxes that I do for the COVID piece. And I understand where you're coming from, Senator.
All right. The board is clear. I have a number of cards, though, of folks that would like to speak, both for and against the emergency plan. So if y'all would, maybe give up your seats, if you don't
Absolutely.
mind.
Madam Chair, with your permission, I'd like to go ahead and move over to the House side. Their committee hearing was called for 11, and I think we're now at 12:06. I can come back after I make a presentation there to close, but I'm not sure how I would close any more than I've already done with all the information that I've provided you, unless there are additional questions that come up, and I can probably send my Commissioner of Elections back if you need, or depending upon how would you like me to handle this situation?
Well,
Another odd situation for us to be in.
Yeah, well, perhaps we should have scheduled more than just an hour's time to be able to vet this. There just hasn't been quite enough time, I don't think, to get all the questions answered and give all the members of the committee an opportunity to have some input in this process. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, we have members that were not able to attend today that would like to have some input, and I think would have some very valuable input as well. I don't know, based on what I have heard so far, and of course we have, again, members of the public that would like to speak up, and we're definitely going to hear from them.
I'm not suggesting that you take action right now just because I have to go to the House to present. I mean, I would assume it would be your normal process, like hearing a bill, where everyone speaks, proponents, opponents, whatnot, and then you decide how you're going to act at the end of that. I'm assuming that's the way you would normally proceed.
Well, we could do, I guess what I can offer is, you've gotten a lot of input today. Again, we're going to continue to get some input from the members of the public. We could offer a couple of different paths. One, we could vote on. We have to take two votes, both on the emergency certification and the emergency plan. We could give you an opportunity to take some of the input that you heard here today, get input from the Senate members who were not here today, and of course you're going to get input from the House members, and consider including some of that in your emergency plan. And we would be happy to come back when you're ready and meet with you to hear that second emergency plan and consider it at that time.
I think it's obviously it's your prerogative. You are the appropriate committee to deal with this issue as stated in RS 18:401.3. If you're telling me that the will of the committee is to not act today, then certainly There are issues associated with that, but we will take all of your comments into consideration, and any other members that could not make it as well, and go from there. If you all decide not to act, I think that's acting in and of itself, for us to either go back to the drawing board if we can, and if we can't, just to report back to you that we can't. And if we've missed the timeline, then we've missed the timeline.
Well, again, that's your timeline, and we're working with you as much as we can, but we want to make sure that,
Well,
we
understand
have
it's
done
not
our
my
part.
it's not my arbitrary timeline. It's my supply line timeline. I mean, I can only do what I can do and say what I can say. I think we've covered it all, and my feel for what I get. I think there's a lot of reservations from the committee, and I don't see us forcing a vote if it's going to be a negative vote. If it sits, then perhaps I can amend it and resubmit it. I'm not sure. I have to talk to legal counsel. I'm not exact. I mean, we're in uncharted territory every way we look at this.
Sure, absolutely. Senator Price.
Yes, Madam Chairman, and I know we've been here a while and we've had this discussion, and then I realize we running on a timeline. We in extraordinary territory with this COVID-19 virus, and I don't think we're gonna ever come to where everybody's gonna agree on everything at this point. But and just me, I feel at some point we have to move, and I know. I mean, if it doesn't come out this committee, then probably don't even need to have a House hearing, because both bodies has to approve it. If one does not approve it, no sense in going to the House if this body doesn't approve it at this point. I mean, you may want to go and explain yourself, but it's not going to get you anywhere today. I think at some point we either need to let him know if we are going to take action or not take action. So I'm willing to move forward. Some of you may not be willing to, but I am willing to move forward to try so we can move this forward. I think one of the most fundamental rights of the people of this state is the right to vote. And I commend the Secretary for at least bringing something forward to us to try to move this process forward. So we certainly don't know where we're going to be in July. I can't predict it. One thing I do know is that this is real, and we've hesitated on a lot of other things that I think we probably could have done better by taking this virus very seriously. Are we going to be here in July? Who knows? I would hope not. I pray not. I pray every night that this virus goes away. But if it does not go away, I do not want to deny the people of the state of Louisiana the right to vote, and in more than one way. I commend for the extension of the early voting. I do not think that this document as written, and there are concerns, but we always have concerns. Even the part where right now any citizen can say that they're going to be out of town and request a ballot and get a ballot. I don't see any difference in what we're doing here right now. So I would like to move forward. I think we need to, and then let the House make a decision on what they want to do. And if we don't do it, if you all still have reservation and we don't pass it, we don't pass it. But I am ready to move forward at the appropriate time. I know we have some other people that want to talk, that we move forward. And after that, I will make a motion to move forward with this document.
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciate your point. I think we all want the same thing. We do all want people to have the right to vote and to exercise their right to vote. It's very important to me as well. And we want to make sure that we have a system that is of the highest integrity, and so that people have faith and confidence in our elections and the results of our elections. And we want to protect our people so that they're safe and and protected from, any virus or any other health concern that's out there. And so I think that's what we're trying to do today, is to have a discussion and to develop a balanced approach. Secretary and his staff have done a tremendous job, again, in putting together a proposal that is looking at things from all angles and trying to anticipate what the needs could be 3 months from now, which is a Herculean effort. Most of us can't predict what's going to happen 3 days from now. And so it's a tall task, and I really commend the work that you've done. I think, Senator, again, your points are taken. They're a little bit early yet in the process. I do want to hear from the public before we make any decisions about how this committee might choose to go forward.